Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our parent meeting. I'm still getting a few messages from people that the link is not working for them. I believe there's about 75 people on at the moment, so it's working somehow. I'm trying to send some quick messages to people as this gets started. So hopefully this will take care of things. So the plan for tonight is that I'll be talking to you like this and also pulling up a PowerPoint periodically, kind of going back and forth as we go through our agenda. I'm very disappointed we're not able to meet in person. I certainly am looking forward to getting to know the Saratoga community. Everybody I've met so far, from the staff to parents to students, has been so gracious to me in understanding of this situation that we're in. So hopefully tonight you can learn a little bit about where the school is at in its planning, what some of our thoughts are at this point heading into the school year. This is not going to answer every question you might have, but it will definitely give you some answers. And from here, we'll take some feedback and regroup with the staff and our planning committee to make some more final decisions as we inch closer to the school year. So what I'd like to do is begin with prayer. So if we could remember that we are always and everywhere in the holy presence of God. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as we would have it. Trusting that he will make all things right if we surrender to his will, that we may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. When I read that, when I say that prayer, I'm reminded that we don't know what God's plan is. And if there's ever a time that we haven't known what God's plan is, it's probably the last 6 months. And that we have to trust in him and trust one another. That prayer, we often know the beginning part, we're like, accept what I cannot change and let me to know the difference. But we don't notice that last piece. We don't hear it very often, where we talk about being reasonably happy. There's no expectation that we are 100% happy all the time. And if we want to be happy all the time, we're always going to be disappointed, which in and of itself is a little ironic. So we have to understand that things will be hard, but we have to work together to make it better. And there's no better situation to put that into practice than now, as so many things are up in the air with school, with work, with home, that we're now having to do this thing that, 103 years? I don't think any of us were around the last time there was a pandemic. So we're doing this together, and we're doing it hopefully with grace, where we're lifting each other up. So with that, let's get started with our meeting. So the agenda for tonight is, again, to pray. I'll give a brief introduction. I will go over some plans for the reopening, which will break down into a lot of different areas. And then I will address some parent questions. Thank you. There were something like 30 or 40 submissions ahead of this meeting. Questions were very similar, so I tried to group them into categories, and we'll address those as we move through. Okay. So just as an introduction, again, if you're just joining, I'm relatively new to this type of presentation, so forgive me if I pause as I try to figure things out. So first of all, welcome to everybody. Welcome to more or less the start of the 2020-21 school year. I'm excited to be with you. My name is Mr. Kilmade, Mr. K. My name is Joe Kilmade. I am an Albany native who is moving back. I've not worked in the Capital District. I've spent the last 14 years serving schools in other parts of the country. Most recently, I spent 10 years in the Archdiocese of St. Louis. There are over 100 elementary schools and 25 plus Catholic high schools in that school system. So I come with some experience and hopefully some ideas that are going to continue to move Saratoga Central Catholic in a direction that is positive and growing. I have spent a lot of time getting to know the faculty and this facility and just kind of wrapping my head around what it is that needs to be completed, what needs to be done before we head into the school year. When I met with faculty, I asked just a handful of questions. I asked everybody just their background, and then I asked, what was the best part about Saratoga? What is it that makes this place so special? And almost to a person, the answer was community, that students hold each other up, that families look out and care for each other, and that faculty do the same, and that together, everybody makes it work. Again, a good place to start when trying to manage a pandemic. So with that in mind, we've kind of launched into planning. Before I got here, Mr. Kondratowicz had done a great job getting committees set up. So we have a reopening committee consisting of about 8 to 10 faculty members and board members, and they're divided into 3 committees. There's health and safety, facilities, and activities. So independently, those groups have been working to look at those areas and decide what needs to be done, changed, purchased, nixed, etc. And then we kind of get together and game plan. We've met 5 or 6 times since I started, either in small groups or big groups, and we are starting to chip away at some of our plans. So, reopening. Let me get you here. So first I'm going to talk about just our timeline, what has been and what will be over the course of the summer. I'll talk a little bit about the survey results for that was sent out. So I sent out a parent survey, about a month ago, and I'll kind of review some of those results that have been helping to inform our decisions. And then tell you a little bit about what New York State is expecting of us and how the Diocese of Albany has been guiding our decision making, making it a little bit easier for us. I'll talk about the health and safety aspect of the plan. And then I'll move into what we're thinking about our facilities, talk about activities, academics, and then ultimately, and then from there, I'll move into some of our parent questions. So just thinking about a timeline. So last Friday, a plan was given to the New York State Department of Health for review. Next Friday, we have to submit something to the Department of Education. That report, that statement, once approved, is required to be posted on our website for everybody to see. Every school in the state of New York has to do that. Some schools have already done it. Ours is not quite ready to be posted yet, given the dynamic nature of our building. And the reality, me being new, wanting to make sure that I'm checking all the boxes, we're not ready to post that yet. It will be ready and submitted on Friday, and ultimately up to you shortly. We'll spend the next few weeks cleaning the building, getting ready. Faculty have meetings on and off beginning August 24th, followed by student and family orientation days, specific times and groupings to be determined. We'll let you know that as soon as we're able. But we will do that after Labor Day. Then our first day of school is now September 14th. I must say that that decision was made not by me, not by anyone at Saratoga Catholic. It was a kind of a mandate coming from the diocese because so much is uncertain. Allowing a couple extra days for training for staff and orientation for students, those couple of days plus the weekend that follows, it gives everybody just a little bit more breathing room heading into the school year. And so for that reason, we are delaying school just until the 14th. Okay, so parent survey results. So we had a couple people have responded even today. We're up to 125, but when I crunched these numbers a little while ago, we had 123 respondents representing 151 students. And if you assume that well, anyways, so that's a return rate of about 80% of our families responded, which is wonderful. In that, I had asked a question, how comfortable were you with different scenarios? There was, reopening in person, a hybrid model, or a purely distance model. The result of that was the highest percentage of people, which was all but, I believe it was like 12 people. 12 families said they were comfortable in some aspect of returning. 91% of you did say you planned to return. 9 were undecided. So that's great. 91 is a good number, but 9 undecided. Of course, we want to be cognizant of that. Sorry, Mrs. Mantilla, my sound person, just told me to speak louder, so I will do that. So if you know her, send her a text message if I say something that you don't like or if I'm not talking loud enough, and then I'll fix it. I'll do the best I can to fix it. Okay, so back to the survey. So highest percent of people were comfortable with in-person instruction, but there were some common concerns which I hope to address tonight. Cleaning and cleanliness of the building, safety procedures and things we're putting in place. Are there options for distance learning? Questions like, what if someone contracts the virus? What if someone needs to be isolated? Things like that. And then also technology. What does the school have? How are we going to improve upon last semester's distance learning plan? And things like that. What I will say, sorry, hopefully you can all hear me better now. In all of those things in the survey, like I said, it is very evident that there's a wide range of opinions and a wide range of things that people want. In response to the same statement about we're going to be back in person, there was a response of, oh my gosh, I don't think I can do that, to thank you, thank you, thank you, this is exactly what we need. And then everything in between. And I've found that that has more or less been the case as we come to every decision point along the way. And what has been guiding the decisions to this point is really just what is best for everybody, and how can we reasonably accommodate all of you? How can we support and teach our students, your children, while keeping them safe and helping you all feel safe, that we have enough safety requirements in place, that there's enough opportunity for socialization, but is safe. And there's so many things that come into that, from the size of the staff to what we have to order to stay safe and be clean, to making the schedule, which is challenging in a normal circumstance at a school. So there's just all these added points. So I just hope that if you feel comfortable sharing your concerns, your opinions, my door is always open. Like I said, for every response that's one way, it's also the other. I've talked to people in every place, and I really just want to do my best to make you feel heard and help, guide our community in the best direction we can. So the survey was a good place. From that, the reopening committee and I started having more detailed conversations about how are we going to start our day. We started finalizing plans for like the way the building will be set up and different things like that. And I will get to that in just a little bit. Sorry, I just got to get back to my PowerPoint. So New York State expectations and diocesan guidance. Basically, New York State asked us to consider 4 things and how we would respond to them. Our reopening, our containment when something happens, our communication when something happens, and then how would we handle closure if for some reason uniquely, like we had a problem and needed to close, or just in general, maybe Saratoga or New York State decided that something needed to change and we had to move from in-person to purely remote. So we had to kind of outline what those things were, how we were going to approach that. I will say that many of the things that kind of go into that are pretty standard. For the most part, we have to, what's the word? We have to follow guidelines. If we reach a certain percentage, if a certain percentage of people in Saratoga County are testing positive, it will mandate that we close. If somebody in the community who's been in the building is verified to have had the virus, there are certain protocols in place to report that to the health department, communicate with the family, communicate back out to the community. Realistically, let's say that somebody did, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but if someone did contract the COVID and they had to be out of school, as far as communication goes, we would have to let people know who maybe were in contact with that person, but we're not going to broadcast that Johnny Smith in the 7th grade has this. That's not how it will work. We will follow guidelines. We will protect your privacy, but also do our due diligence in communicating. So there's a balance. As the virus and infections and things become, it's going down, but it's not going away. So it has become more normal. I can even think of like the first person in the St. Louis metro area who got it was all over the news for like 3 days. And within a week, there were 100 people and nobody remembered that first person. So at this point, we're talking about how can we safely let people know, help people get healthy, and remain open for everybody else. And so that was what went into those plans of reopening, containment, and communication. So as I go through the rest of the PowerPoint, I will explain some of our thinking around those things. So with health and safety, so every day we'll begin with a health check. We are going to sign up for an application, and you can certainly just do it on paper, but there'll be like a handful of questions that everybody is asked every day. Have you had a fever? Have you been out of state, etc. You'll be able to answer that on an app before you get to school. And what that'll help with is you get to school, we check that you answered the questions, we take your temperature, you go to class. If you didn't do the app ahead of time, then you would need to fill it out on paper, and we keep that on file. But every student, every day, every faculty member, every day. We will have an isolation room. One of the offices on the first floor, as you walk in, the main entrance will be converted into an isolation room with a sink. It'll have all of the appropriate protocols in place so that if someone comes to school who is showing signs, or if during the day a student begins to show signs of any symptoms that related to COVID-19, that's where they would be. If someone needed to go home, that's where they would be. We have a process in place to communicate with parents. We would walk the student out to the car, et cetera, and as to not introduce any new people into the building. With that, we'll be limiting the number of visitors. I don't have a final decision, but we will be adjusting expectations for parent engagement. At this point, my thought is more moving away from service hours and volunteer hours and more towards engagement hours. Attendance at virtual events like this, participation in certain ways within the community, just so that you're engaged, especially since we can't have people in the building as much as normal. So I did mention the isolation room, which will be here on the first floor. Supervision and training. Faculty members will be either teaching a little bit more than they have in the past or having additional duties. So because we have to do things like, we have to do things like check the bathrooms, make sure there's not too many people in the bathrooms, make sure students are following expectations in the hallway and in stairwells and things like that. Lunch will be a whole thing, which I'll get to in a bit. So the idea that we have more hands on deck at all times is really important. And with that comes some training. So the nurse, obviously, but then office staff, we will be trained in handling more serious cases if somebody is showing symptoms, so that more than one person. We can't put this all on the nurse, but the staff will be trained, and then the office staff will have even more training to be safe. And then as far as masks, PPE, personal protective equipment, and cleaning services, I'll start with the easy one, cleaning services. We are tripling, if I'm understanding correctly, we're doubling or tripling our cleaning staff. So we're investing in additional personnel for cleaning throughout the day and in the evenings. The school is purchasing protective equipment because at entrances and things, we need more than just a simple cloth mask. And so we will have equipment available throughout the day. And then also masks. If somebody forgets one, doesn't have one, needs an extra, something like that, we will have masks available in the building. I'll get to the question of what about masks in a little bit, but I do want to say, so at this point, what we know, we will follow guidance, is that masks will be required in any location in the building where students cannot maintain social distancing. Hallways, things like bathrooms, things like that. If a student has to get up and go to the office, things like that. Expectations are changing as far as in the classroom. Just 2 weeks ago, the guideline was if you're socially distanced, you do not need to wear a mask. And to that end, we've set up our classrooms where desks are 6 feet apart and things like that. However, that guidance is changing daily. So we will follow whatever the expectation is within Saratoga, state of New York. So at this moment in time, the last time we had any sort of guidance, that guidance was masks everywhere you couldn't maintain social distancing, and in the classroom, if you are 6 feet apart, you can choose not to wear your mask. That's not to say you have to take it off. And that's not to say we wouldn't change that if students aren't able to follow those guidelines. But as of the last time we checked, had this exact question asked of principals at the diocese and the diocese themselves, it was, if you're 6 feet apart, it is okay to take off your mask, but it's not mandated that you take it off. But again, that type of guidance seems to change regularly, and we will do whatever is recommended at that time. Teachers will have the option to wear personal protective equipment. I mean, obviously, everybody has the option to do that. One of the questions was a lot of questions around, what if somebody doesn't want to wear a mask? What if they feel like, you can't tell me when and where to wear a mask? The answer to that is, if we say you have to wear a mask, you have to wear a mask. Just like if you're trying to go to a store that has a mask requirement, you can't just walk in without a mask. And if you do, they have every right to ask you to leave. You can just go to another store that either doesn't care or has a different expectation. However, if our expectation is you wear a mask in these places, then we expect to see students wearing a mask in those places. And then from there, if it's still refused, or if somebody wants to talk about it, we certainly can. But pretty straightforward. If we ask, if there's an expectation that it be worn in a certain place at a certain time, the expectation is that it's followed. And if someone's not able to do that, then we'll have to talk about their ability to be here. But I know, again, that everybody cares about one another, and so we will do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Okay, so next thing is, so facilities. So this is a tricky one. We love our building. It's nice and small, and we're together. But now that we need to spread out, it has created some challenges as we begin to plan. But we do feel that we've come up with our best possible scenario as we begin to plan our facilities. for the coming school year. So first of all, one approach is that we're going to take is thinking of the building in cohorts. While not 100% perfect, we will try and separate perfect because sometimes students in different grades have class together. But for the most part, we're going to be using the ground floor for middle school classes, the first floor for juniors and seniors, and then the top floor for freshmen and sophomores. Knowing that there might be a class that has juniors and sophomores, and so students would have to change floors in that scenario. However, as much as possible, we will schedule students, and it's very likely that there will be students, particularly middle school, who are on their floor the whole day, with the exception of maybe if they're in the gym or they go outside for something. They will change classes, but they'll be in that floor. So we kind of limit the number of students that are in each room. So like one room has, the junior class and the senior class are in there at some point over the course of 2 days. Maybe there's a handful of 10th graders, as opposed to everybody in the whole building has Spanish and they all run through the same room. So by taking this cohort approach, we have less students in each space over the course of a day, a week, a month. In addition to that cohort approach, we're also creating additional spaces in the building and on campus. So we are temporarily storing all of our weight room equipment, which creates a new space on the lower level, on the ground floor of the building. As well as we are expanding. We are going to use the parish center across the parking lot minimally, but for high school cafeteria, as well as art and music classes, which only happen once or twice a week. So we're still working out the details of that. We'll schedule it, but it's essentially students in the middle school, there'll be a room over there that's designated for their art or music. And so when they have that class, that's the room that they go to. It's just in another building. And upperclassmen eating lunch there means that they stay out of the ground floor in the main school building, but they do have a space. How are we approaching keeping them spaced out at the cafeteria? There are big round tables that socially distanced can fit 3 students. So there are 10 of those, so that's 30 students, plus some additional spaces. We can have about 30 to 40 students distance appropriately eating lunch over in the parish center. And so we should be able, if it's just the high school eats there, we should be able to maintain our regular lunch rotation. As far as the cafeteria goes, we are going to be asking that families pre-order lunch the week before. So something where you would submit an order on Thursday, probably give you to Friday if you tend to run late. And then when it's the next week, when it's time for lunch, it's Monday, you ordered a turkey sandwich lunch and a cookie. You go down, it's got your name on it. You take it and you go to your space. And then for upperclassmen eating in the annex in the parish center, their food would be over there, so they would just go out to that space. But again, pre-ordered and labeled so we know what to give you. There will not be an a la carte option or vending machines or anything like that for the time being. But that is the plan for the cafeteria. As I said, the use of the parish center for art and music and for high school lunch. Again, what this does is it spreads us out just a little bit more, which allows us to utilize the building and keep us spread apart. What has been done as of right now is we kind of did a building assessment. We went through every room in the building and figured out what is the maximum amount of students that could be present in that room and socially distanced. And it ranged anywhere from Smallest room was 9, but most are like 14, 15, 16 students. Um, so knowing that, it kind of gave us some direction on where teachers needed to be. So again, as I said, with doing this cohort model with people on different floors, teachers will have to move. So that'll be a lot of the work in the building over the month of August, is shifting around who's where and in what room, and then making the school schedule match so that there's not overlap and things like that. But we should be able to, again, accommodate more classes at once, which is going to be needed. So classes like in the middle school in particular, if there's 22 kids in the 7th grade, perhaps in the past they had one section of science or one section of math. 22 is too many, and so we will make those into 2 sections, which means we have more classes going on. So there's just kind of this domino effect of, we got to check out the building, everything's got to be more spread out, which means we need more classes, which means we need more supervision, which means we need more space. And for that reason, the Paris Center, the weight room can fit 24 students spaced out, so we'll be able to put a larger group in there from time to time. The gym as well is an option for regular classes if teachers just want a space to spread out. A PE class will be outside as much as possible. It wouldn't have been outside today. And in that case, they would have been in the gym or spread out into a couple classrooms and had like a health unit or something like that. I'm not going to talk about PE uniforms just yet because we have many important things to go over. I'll tackle that when we get to the end. Make sure I don't forget that. It's on there. Okay. So back to the facilities. So use of Paris Center, social distancing around the building. So we'll be getting signage and different things for the floor, the walls, the bathrooms, outside, all of that. Just to remind students what the expectations are. Like I said before, we'll have some supervision going on around bathrooms and when students change classes to make sure that those places aren't overcrowded, things like that. I will say Mr. D'Ambro has gone above and beyond planning out the year. We have enough supplies for what we believe will get us to about November. We're currently looking into getting added ventilation, air purifiers, fans, things like that to help circulate the air in the building. That's been a big push from the state and the CDC to help keep fresh air moving throughout the building in the absence of a central air system, which we do not have. Then air movement is important. So we have windows that open, obviously, but we're looking into, as far as fans, window fans, ventilation systems that we can reasonably afford to improve, airflow around the building. And then just classrooms, masks, and PPE. I already explained where we're at with that. We're going to follow guidelines as they are written, make adjustments if we have to be stricter than what those guidelines are. And if a student is not meeting our expectations as far as remaining safe, then we'll address that on a case-by-case basis. Okay, so academics. What is school going to look like? How are we going to accommodate students who need to be home? So one of the biggest things is that we are going to be moving towards using the Google Education Suite, which is a free service, and it integrates with a lot of things like PowerSchool and Schoology. And really what it does is it just provides a consistent platform for students. Currently, most students make a Gmail address with a certain prefix like jkilmade.scc@gmail.com. And that's fine, but those are actually personal emails. And the school has no real control over them. It can lead to confusion. It kind of limits our ability to do things. So we'll be moving. Everyone will have a at saratogacatholic.org email address, students included. And what that means is that the school can better manage student work, student communication, student files, things like that. And it really is not very different than what is currently being used. Like I said, it works with Schoology, it works with PowerSchool. It just kind of cleans it up on the back end. It makes it easier for the office to run reports and group students, and it'll just be a lot cleaner and will help us, whether a student is physically present in school or working from home. It'll kind of give a consistent platform. And like I said, it'll be managed by the school. So when you have questions, we'll be able to answer them and actually get in and check things out for you. Kind of with that, every class will kind of have a digital profile. The expectation that there is an online presence for the class, whether a student is here or not. The idea being that if a student is in the classroom, they're submitting work online, they're seeing materials available online. Yes, there are things that come with being in the class discussions, small group, things like that. But if for whatever reason we had to pivot from being in person to being at home, if we have this digital backbone, so to speak, to what we're doing, it allows for an easier transition. So it's like, you're used to seeing your work online, completing your work online, turning it in online. Well, now you're doing the same, but you're at home. And now here's your schedule for your Zoom calls, your Google Meet calls, whatever it is that you have. Here's what your day looks like and what the expectations are for you if we shift to a purely remote scenario. So again, creating that technology backbone for everything going on in the classroom, so that if a student suddenly can't be here because they need to quarantine, things like that, they'll be able to still access the information for the time that they're at home. Kind of like I mentioned, we'll have regular course offerings with smaller classes. We do have some faculty change. Honestly, we have few faculty moving on, but other faculty members picking up classes and stretching into new areas. So even with that, we will still be offering the same courses as we've had in the past, with some smaller class sizes. And then the particulars of your child and what they're going to be taking, especially those transferring in, that'll be something that you and our guidance counselor, Mrs. Mulkern, work out over the next month as we get things settled. Kind of what I said, as far as our planning goes, we've kind of identified which teachers should be in which rooms. The next step is to start to schedule the classes, or we'll move those people, schedule the classes. So with that, connecting with families. So hybrid planning process. So there have been a lot of questions, and I'm sure there's probably some people who are on this meeting simply because they want an answer to this particular topic. What about working from home? What does that look like? Can I choose to do that regardless of my health? What does that look like? So what do I know for sure? I know for sure that we have to have a plan for students who need to quarantine, students whose personal health, as noted by a doctor, or just their contact with somebody, exposure, etc., mandates that they be home. We need a way for them to engage with curriculum and be present as a student. Hence the digital presence for all of the classes, because at any time anybody could have to shift in that direction. So we're aware of that. So we want to create that experience. Can that experience be offered to everyone in a way that it totally 100% mimics being in school? That is the question that we cannot answer at this moment in time. I'm sorry if that's disappointing, but the reality is there are implications for who does it, how do you choose to do it. I know the one scenario we do not want is saying you can pick from day to day whether or not you come in, and it's going to be the same. We do not have the ability to do that. That on a daily basis, somebody can choose, I'm going to work from home, I'm going to be at school. Today I feel like it, today I don't. I would hope that people would be consistent. So the idea is like, the question we're kind of posing to ourselves over this next week and after, I'm sure you'll have more feedback now that you've heard me say this, can we reasonably come up with a way for people to choose to be home and still give them the experience of being at school? How do we manage that? Can we afford a staff member to do that, to manage that situation? I don't believe we have the infrastructure to live stream classes and have students just log in and pretend like they're there. We're just not set up that way in the building. Not yet. That's definitely something I want to work towards. The Google piece is a good first step. But again, so we will have a plan for students who are ill or need to quarantine in that sense. Is there an option for you to just say, you know what, I want to be remote all year, no matter what, but I'm still a student? We're trying to answer that question, and I do not have an answer. It requires a little more than just saying, yeah, I'm going to be home, and now you're there. So there's a lot to consider, and we've kind of gotten most things figured out, and that's where we're at. From this meeting, I want to have another parent meeting in 2 weeks, and at that time, we will have a definitive answer, if not before then. And please hold me to that. Call me every day if you want. Ask me where we're at. Like I said, we're talking about it constantly, but at this point in time, I cannot give you an answer. And I'm sorry if that's not enough. And I'd be glad to talk to you about it and hear your ideas. I've already heard some. So just know that we're aware. We want as many students to be here, because when this goes away, when we're able to be back and everyone's feeling comfortable, we don't want to have, we would hate to have lost students because of that. Because of that one piece. But the reality, we have to be realistic about what our abilities are, and we're trying to feel that out. And what can teachers handle? What can the building handle? What kind of technology and infrastructure do we have to support that? That's the assessment that's happening, and that's our biggest work, I would say, besides the schedule itself, over the next couple weeks. Okay. So the last piece, don't go anywhere. So many good things to say. Last piece of this, activities. So I think I said this before, there's no athletics until further notice. Some activities will be permitted with distancing, and we will be able to have prayer services and masses that are appropriately social distanced. To that end, so just as far as athletics go, New York State has said practices cannot start until, I don't know the exact date. I want to say it's September 12th or 14th, mid-September, if they're allowed to start. And if so, then fall sports will start, but they're just a month later than normal. If for some reason sports are delayed until next semester, there is a plan to get all sports in one semester. So there'll be 10 weeks of 10 weeks of winter sports, followed by 10 weeks of fall sports, followed by 10 weeks of spring sports. So it'll be quite hectic. But assuming that if we can't have sports this semester, and then can next semester, they'll get it all in a short amount of time. Starting on January 4th. Okay, so we're almost there, folks. Thank you for everybody hanging in there with me. Those who are watching this after the fact, thank you for coming to view after the fact. Let me get back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so parent questions. So what if, these are the three types of questions I got were what if, what about, and can we? So what if there's a positive case? What if? So for the student, themselves, obviously we have a kind of an outline, a very detailed outline that I'm not going to share at this moment, but essentially student needs to be certified to be healthy before they return. So that's the most important, is that student safety and their health. And then for other students who maybe have come in contact with that child, we'll follow guidelines as far as who needs to be communicated with and in what way. Um, Suffice to say, if your student had verified contact with somebody who tested positive, you will find out and be given guidance as far as what to do. What if mask rules aren't followed? Hopefully I explained that a little bit. We will enforce them like any other rule. What if we go 100% remote? Again, hopefully I answered that. We pivot on our digital platform to an at-home schedule, complete with scheduled classes and calls at certain times each day, each week. We'll add. I would hope that we would have morning prayer posted through our YouTube page, things like that, to maintain some consistency and some community. What about PE class and uniform? The expectation that I communicated, which I was honestly, I was a little surprised by how much feedback I got, but I thought about it. So the question was, why 80 minutes? Why a uniform? Why do I need to buy a uniform? So why 80 minutes? Students only have 80 minutes of PE. Well, they have 40 minutes every other day in a regular scenario. So by condensing it to 80 minutes once every 3 days or 4 days in the schedule, we are still able to meet our requirement. And by having the uniform, we don't have to use the locker rooms. There's no way that we can logistically and safely use a space to have students change ahead of PE class or after PE class. So the idea is that they come to school in the uniform and they leave the school in the uniform. So that's why we have the PE uniform. That's why the plan is for 80 minutes. The question about can I just use my students, Saratoga swag from their sports teams, and I've got all this stuff. A uniform is a uniform is a uniform. So if it is a financial burden for you, please let us know. But we are sticking with having a uniform so that everybody is the same. And that's what that is. The next question was, what about buses? Okay, so what about buses? At this point, we just started getting communication today from public districts. They're still required to give us busing. So if you take a bus from Shen or Saratoga or Burn Hills, those are still supposed to be provided. I think that they are still figuring out what that looks like. They're stretched so thin, it is challenging. The reason that these big districts are having to go purely remote for large portions of their population is because they just cannot get them there with the restrictions on busing. Basically, on a bus, you can sit as far to the left in one row, so you're in right behind the driver, let's say, and then the next row you got to be on the opposite side against the window. So it's you can only fit one student where there was 4 prior. So buses have a capacity of 1/4 of what they're able to hold. So big districts are struggling to figure that out. They're just now starting to consider how that will work for students in private schools. So they've reached out to talk to us about what our schedule is, and then they'll come back and let us know what they feel they can do. As far as the busing that Saratoga Catholic provides to, I think we run a bus to North Country and we run a bus out towards Amsterdam. We are still assessing the viability of those services being offered. Again, same issue. Logistically, we have one bus that at capacity, given the expectations given what we need to do, we can only drive 5 people in the one bus. A van that was driving out could only carry 1 student. So logistically, financially, safety-wise, we are still assessing whether that can happen or not. Again, I'm sorry if that's the question you were looking for a definitive answer to at this point in time. I cannot give it to you. Maintaining the bus, paying gas for the bus, paying a driver for the bus, and all of that, and then only having a very small number of students on that bus at some point becomes very challenging to do. And so we're trying to figure out what can we safely do to help our families manage. And I would just suggest, if you are a family who needs that bus, otherwise you can't be here, please call the school to talk to me so that we can work it out. We can see what options, you can explain your case. We can try to figure something out. We certainly don't want you to just throw your hands up and walk away, but I totally understand that this is a huge deal for some people. But we need to work it out. So again, we need to do what's best for the school, but we want to do what's best for you. So please don't hesitate to connect with me so we can talk about it. All right, we're almost there. So what about communication as far as the plan goes? Like I said, we had to submit reports to the state. Some schools in the area, public and private, have posted plans. We will soon. Legally, we're not required to at this point, but we will as soon as we are confident in what it says. We don't want to post anything that then has to change. So with the report for the education department being submitted on this Friday, we will be able to then double check it and then post it on our website and send it out to all of you. So within the next week or so, you will have our formal plan with all of the details about, percentages that might force us to close and kind of the nitty gritty about some of the cleaning and things like that. And then the last two questions, can we choose to stay at home? We will have an answer to you soon. I hope to say yes. We're working towards that, but realistically, we need to know what we can do and cannot do. And then the other thing was, can we have reduced tuition if we are at home or if we're forced to be at home? Can tuition somehow be adjusted if they're not physically in school? Our overhead for teachers doesn't change when kids are at home. Some of our facilities costs go down, but it still costs what it costs to educate the students, whether they're in the building or not. We still have bills to pay. At this time, there's no plan at any school that I'm aware of to give reduced tuition in the event that students are at home. I understand that it is a different scenario and that your children are your responsibility and not ours when they're at home to some extent. And I understand that. At the same time, we have teachers who are working. We have added costs. There are other expenses that we're incurring. So while that changes for you, not a lot changes for us. And if we were to give everybody a tuition break because you're at home, we wouldn't be able to employ the teachers to run that program to support you. So it's kind of a rock and a hard place. So at this time, there is no plan to offer a reduced tuition if we go to distance learning. What I hope to do, what I want to do, is make sure that we are serving you in the best way possible, that we are improving upon the successes and the challenges of last semester's distance learning and providing a program that is supportive of students' minds and their bodies and their souls, no matter whether they're in school or at home. And that's our commitment, that we will work incredibly hard, as we have been doing, on your behalf. So next steps, last thing before we go, next steps would be that we have another meeting on the 18th of August. So that's 2 weeks from tonight. Provide some updates. The school will start working on schedules, finalizing enrollment for any new students. And we'll continue with our building preparations in the classroom, in the hallways, pretty much everywhere. And with that, thank you. I am incredibly grateful to have this opportunity to meet you virtually. Now, you all know what I look like. I do not know what you look like. But please, we will get to know each other over time. If you want to meet, come set up a meeting. Because of what you've heard tonight, because you just want to talk more about something, I'm very happy to do that. If you're not comfortable physically coming to the building, but you would like to speak face-to-face, a Zoom call, FaceTime call, anything like that can happen. Just know that I'm available to you. And as I get to know the community and fall in love with this community, I am doing everything I can to support you in your mission as parents and to help your kids learn and grow. And ultimately, we want to get them to heaven and college. Those goals have not changed, and that's what we're going to do. So thank you all. Have a great night. And if somebody didn't attend this meeting, certainly point them to our YouTube channel. It'll be posted relatively soon and can be watched later on. Have a good night.